Welcome to another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. You're listening to a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State, featuring writer, poet, and musician Rick Pidcock. Now here's Rick.
We live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else. But we live in a world, in the real world, Jake, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power.
These were the words of White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller this week to CNN's Jake Tapper. He says the real world is governed by strength, is governed by force, is governed by power. So when conservative Christians overwhelmingly support this administration and are using the administration to advance their own strength, force, and power over their neighbors, we end up having all of the stories we're covering in Highest Power, Church and State. And there was more. Miller also defended the Trump administration's decision to see and take Venezuela.
The United States is using its military to secure our interests unapologetically in our hemisphere. We're a superpower, and under President Trump, we are going to conduct ourselves as a superpower. The future of the free world, Jake, depends on America being able to assert ourselves and our interests without apology. This whole period that happened after World War II, where the West began apologizing and groveling and begging
I don't even
and
know,
engaging these
honestly,
vast
what you're talking
reparation
about right
schemes.
now.
What I'm talking about, Jake, is the idea, and by the way, you do, I know you love doing that smarmy thing, Jake, and I was hoping to be better than that this time.
He says, we're a superpower. We're going to conduct ourselves as a superpower. It doesn't matter if another sovereign country doesn't consent to what we decide to do to them. Because we're the highest power, we supposedly have the right to assert ourselves without apology. So imagine what might happen if a superpower government who believes the real world is governed by strength, force, and power, and that they can assert themselves without apology, were to hire a bunch of unqualified vigilantes to join ICE, give them very little training, and then hand them weapons and immunity. Here was Stephen Miller in October on Fox News.
But what we need to reassure a couple points to all ICE officers: you have federal immunity in the conduct of your duties. And anybody who lays a hand on you or tries to stop you or tries to obstruct you is committing a felony. You have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties. And the Department of Justice has made clear that if officials cross that line into obstruction, into criminal conspiracy against the United States or against ICE officers, then they will face justice.
And just as a reminder, according to a May 2022 report from NPR, quote, former Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper said President Donald Trump inquired about shooting protesters amid the unrest that took place after George Floyd's murder in 2020, unquote. He went on to say, quote, the president was enraged. He thought that the protests made the country look weak, made us look weak, and us meant him. And he wanted to do something about it. We reached that point in the conversation where he looked frankly at Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley and said, quote, can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something? It was a suggestion and a formal question, and we were just all taken aback at that moment as this issue just hung very heavily in the air, unquote. In fact, many of us have seen videos of ICE agents quickly pulling their guns out, waving them around, and pointing them at people. It was only a matter of time before one of them pulled the trigger. So with ICE agents having immunity and being led by an enraged president whose own former officials said he asked if protesters could be shot, the agents stormed into Minneapolis, where one of them yesterday shot and killed Renee Nicole Good. Here were some of the sounds, and I'll add a listener warning. A lot of this is hard to hear.
Dude, you shot her! I'm trying to help! No! You fucking shot someone in the fucking face! You shot someone in the fucking face! Do you man. In the head. In the head.
I didn't do anything. And she's not a murderer. You, look at me. You can't even...
Watch out, man. Watch out.
In a statement to the Minnesota Star Tribune, Renee's mother said, quote, "Renee was one of the kindest people I've ever known. She was extremely compassionate. She's taken care of people all her life. She was loving, forgiving, and affectionate. She was an amazing human being." The story quoted another woman who said, quote, "I met Renee and her wife just a few weeks ago. She fed me tea and cookies at her house while we talked about school stuff." She described Renee as such a warm and loving mother and added, "This is tragic beyond words." Renee's husband, Timmy Ray Macklin Jr., died in 2023, and together they had a 6-year-old son. So how are the government officials responding? Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "I have just viewed the clip of the event which took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is a horrible thing to watch. The woman screaming was obviously a professional agitator, and the woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer, who seems to have shot her in self-defense. Based on the attached clip, it is hard to believe he is alive, but is now recovering in the hospital. The situation is being studied in its entirety, but the reason these incidents are happening is because the radical left is threatening, assaulting, and targeting our law enforcement officers and ICE agents on a daily basis. They are just trying to do the job of making America safe. We need to stand by and protect our law enforcement officers from this radical left movement of violence and hate," unquote. Of course, Trump thinks the woman screaming was a professional agitator. He doesn't know what basic human compassion for your neighbor is. He just thinks he's a superpower who can conduct himself like a superpower does by ignoring the consent of others and asserting himself without apology. And our entire government has taken on that persona. So of course they're not going to apologize. Instead, the Department of Homeland Security posts Trump's ridiculous statement and then instructs everyone in all caps to stand with ICE. Then DHS Secretary Kristi Noem had this to say.
It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased. We're continuing to gather more information, but this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. These vehicle rammings are domestic acts of terrorism. We're working with the Department of Justice to prosecute them as such. We will continue to protect our ICE officers and in cooperation with other law enforcement agencies as well. You've seen me in the last couple of days deploy over 2,000 more officers to the Minneapolis area. And in the last 2 days, we've arrested hundreds and hundreds of dangerous criminals, not just fraudsters who stole from the American people billions of dollars and put it in their pockets and enriched their friends from overseas and themselves, but also individuals who committed acts of murder and rape and trafficking and drug exploitation and child exploitation.
First off, given their allegiance to Trump and their handling of the Epstein cover-ups, Kristi Noem acting like the Trump administration cares about sexual predators is pretty rich. But what's especially infuriating here is how she's gaslighting all of us by claiming that Renee was a terrorist who purposely tried to murder the ICE agent. One could make a case that the ICE agent overreacted out of fear, especially if it's true that he was dragged by another vehicle recently. Of course, so much of what Noem is saying is gaslighting and lies, so I wouldn't be surprised if that story isn't all that accurate either. But if he was indeed dragged by another vehicle recently and was reacting out of trauma, why was he running around with a loaded gun? Nobody with an ounce of common sense who saw that video would think Renee was a domestic terrorist who was attempting to run officers over. Also, Noem said he was following his training? How exactly is shooting into a vehicle 3 times part of their training? To the contrary, here's journalist and former New York City police chief spokesman John Miller on CNN explaining DHS's training for moving vehicles.
We did this in New York in 1994, 95. We changed it in LAPD when I was there in 2004. but it's basically simple, which is if you're confronted by a moving vehicle that could be a threat to you, get out of the way of the vehicle and don't shoot at a car. Now, this is DHS policy. I'm reading to you from DHS policy. DHS law enforcement officers are prohibited from discharging firearms at the operator of a moving vehicle or other conveyance unless the use of deadly force of the... Basically, it says, unless it's...
This appears to be black and white.
Well, it does. And it also says a law enforcement officer must take into consideration the hazards that may be posed to law enforcement and innocent bystanders by an out-of-control vehicle, which we just saw the result of that. The point is, unless the person is literally either using the vehicle to ram other people in a terrorist attack, or has a car bomb, or is chasing you with the vehicle in particular, getting out of the way and reducing the tactical exigency where you're not creating a situation where you're forced to fire these shots is what most law enforcement agencies have adopted.
So with the Trump administration gaslighting us all, here's what Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey had to say.
They're ripping families apart. They're sowing chaos on our streets. And in this case, quite literally killing people. So they are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is bullshit. This was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying, getting killed. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. Somebody is dead. That's on you. This was an agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying. To the family, I'm so deeply sorry. We're going to be working towards justice as quickly as we possibly can right now. And justice is what we've all got to get. We're going to make sure that in this very difficult moment, we do not take the bait that these ICE agents are trying to create and that the federal government, to be clear, wants. We can show them the kind of courage, bravery, love, and compassion that makes Minneapolis, Minneapolis. Let's unite around hope and love and peace and getting justice.
And here's what Minnesota Governor Tim Walz had to say.
We've been warning for weeks that the Trump administration's dangerous, sensationalized operations are a threat to our public safety, that someone was going to get hurt. Just yesterday, I said exactly that. What we're seeing is the consequences of governance designed to generate fear, headlines, and conflict. It's governing by reality TV, and today that recklessness cost someone their life. Donald Trump and his administration may not care much about Minnesota, that's been pretty evident, but we love this state. We won't let them tear us apart. We'll not turn against each other. To Minnesotans, I say this, I feel your anger. I'm angry. They want a show. We can't give it to them. We cannot. If you protest and express your First Amendment rights, please do so peacefully as you always do. We can't give them what they want. The hearts and minds of the people in this state are on our side. To Americans, I ask you this, please stand with Minneapolis. To Minnesotans, know that our administration is going to stop at nothing to seek accountability and justice. The State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension are working on the investigation. We have activated the State Emergency Operations Center. And from here on, I have a very simple message. We do not need any further help from the federal government. To Donald Trump and Kristi Noem, you've done enough. There's nothing more important than Minnesotan safety. I've issued a warning order to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. We have soldiers in training and prepared to be deployed if necessary. I remind you, a warning order is a heads up for folks. And these National Guard troops are our National Guard troops. They're teachers in your community, they're business owners, they're construction professionals. They are Minnesotans. Minnesota will not allow our community to be used as a prop in a national political fight. We will not take the bait.
Unfortunately to white evangelicals and conservative Catholics, Trump hasn't done enough. They want more. And later this year, they're planning to vote to keep this administration going without any accountability in Congress. But white evangelicals and conservative Catholics aren't the only religious people involved here. Just like we covered in episode 71, where I interviewed pastors Hannah Cardin and Quincy Worthington about ICE's attacks in Chicago, There are also pastors in Minneapolis who are working for the healing of their city and the protection of their neighbors. Martha Bardwell is the lead pastor at Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Minneapolis. She was on the scene yesterday with a number of other local pastors. She posted on social media yesterday, quote, "Please pray for Minneapolis. This morning, ICE shot and killed a 37-year-old woman who was observing ICE activity. I joined other clergy at the scene for a while. We witnessed and joined in the raw pain and grief. We prayed and sang across the street from where this woman was murdered. We prayed for peace with justice in the city. We prayed for the hands of the healers. We prayed for hearts that are bent on hate, that they might be turned towards love. Trump has decided to send a reign of terror here. ICE is going to keep baiting civilians who are rightfully angry and feeling rage to perpetrate violence so they can justify their reckless and cruel actions. Let's be clear that ICE officers are the ones who are seeding this chaos and violence. We need to be disciplined and show up in the strength of who we are as Minnesotans and human beings, loving and caring for one another and exercising courageous nonviolence. Please pray with us." Then later she added, quote, "I love this city. Tonight at a scene of terror and grief, holy ground as neighbors came together. Representative Aisha Gomez spoke for us when she said, 'We will not be intimidated. We will keep showing up with love to protect our neighbors.' Jailani Hussein prayed for us when she said, 'May this be the moment that we turn away as a nation from this evil towards the good. May the death of Renee Good call this nation towards the good.' Indigenous songs, immigrant voices, commitment all around to one another. Neighbors helping neighbors up when they slipped on the slushy ice. People holding candles, bumping into friends and neighbors sharing hugs. Thousands standing together even when the sound system was only good enough for a few hundred to hear. At one point before the vigil, clergy were huddled together. A neighbor started shouting with rage and was causing a stir. We started spontaneously singing Dona Nobis Pacem and kept singing it. People joined, people filmed, and a woman walked by me afterwards and said, 'Thank you for singing. I didn't know how much I needed that.' Grant us peace, God, peace that is the presence of justice, peace that is protection for all your beloveds, peace that is an end to this terror, peace that abides. Amen." Then this morning, Martha sat down with me to discuss her experience. You shared on social media that you and a group of clergy joined together at the scene yesterday in the raw pain and grief of praying and singing. Could you just give us a sense of what you witnessed there and what you were praying for?
Yeah. So by the time I showed up, ICE agents were starting to leave the scene. There was caution tape all around the perimeter of where Renee Good was shot and killed. And Minneapolis police were coming in to secure that perimeter. And a lot of neighbors had gathered, hundreds of neighbors were gathered. People were really angry, really sad, really horrified. And of course, this killing comes just over 5 years after George Floyd was murdered on our streets, not far from where this happened yesterday. And so the raw pain of that experience and the distrust of police still that persists because of George Floyd's murder was very much on display. Our mayor came on site. I was right with the mayor as he was walking right behind me and went under the perimeter to talk to law enforcement. And he spoke really clearly later on. I was so grateful for his statement, very clear that he wants ICE out of this city and that the way that law enforcement is being deployed right now in our city is to try and investigate so that they can make a case for ICE getting out of this city. So I'm grateful for our mayor's leadership. But our clergy came together and we were trying to be peaceful and de-escalating presence. And we just decided, like, let's go as close as we can to the site of her murder and let's pray together. And so we just made a circle and linked arms and took turns saying prayers out loud. And then we sang together a song, the words of which are, "We resist, we refuse to let hatred in. We rise up, we won't back down. We're in this till the end." And then it goes, pray for your enemies, welcome the stranger, show love for your neighbor. We're in this till the end. So we were there to be with community, to witness, to to be with our community in the raw grief of the moment and to pray. Um, yeah.
So you mentioned in your post that ICE has been baiting civilians
Mm.
by seeding chaos and violence. And I know many of us have seen videos and video clips online and stuff, but like, how have you and your neighbors experienced this firsthand?
Yeah. So I saw a photo yesterday posted by a friend of her friend being shot point blank by a rubber bullet in the face. Um, Also, one of my congregation members goes to Roosevelt High School. And yesterday, like this would have been national news had Renee not been shot. At this high school, during dismissal, students are out there getting on buses. ICE shows up in force, tackles two staffers of the school to the ground, and starts spraying pepper spray. It's just seeding chaos and intimidation. And I heard that one of the educators was released after being detained, but it's cruel. It's just reckless cruelty. And our own governor put it well when he said they want to show. They want to show from us so that they can justify the actions and the cruelty that they're bringing to our city. But we are a really strong community. Like we stand together and have strong relationships of solidarity across race, across faith. And my prayer is that we don't have outside agitators who are going to come in and try and blow this thing up, but that we stand together really strong and really determined to continue to demand that ICE gets out of our city.
Yeah. So, as a Christian minister, how do you make sense of the fact that so many of the most ardent supporters of this violence claim to be Christian?
Oh, I mean, it's just so clear that white Christian nationalism is such a distortion and corruption of our faith. And so I feel like it's really incumbent upon me and other white Christian leaders to be really clear about what the gospel actually calls for and demands. And that is loving God and loving our neighbors as ourselves. It is working for justice and peace. It is serving all people following the example of Jesus. So, I mean, we've seen throughout history attempts by empire to co-opt the Christian faith and to use it to their own ends. And we see that right now in this reign of terror on our streets. And it's incumbent on us, it's our responsibility to provide a different witness right now.
Yeah. And part of loving your neighbor is speaking up when the violence is happening.
Mm-hmm.
But like, do you have any recommendations for how those of us who find our neighbors being attacked should process both the responsibility to speak up alongside the risks of speaking up?
Yeah. I just heard from a clergy colleague who got some terrible phone calls from somebody dealing threats to her and her congregation. And so the risks are real. And again, Jesus calls us to follow the way of the cross. And so we need to be grounded in that calling, and each person needs to discern for themselves how they're willing to show up. But we certainly can't turn around and turn our backs to the suffering right now. It's incumbent on all of us to really do what we can to love and serve in this moment. And what I see happening here in Minneapolis is, I'm sure, similar to what's happening in other cities that are experiencing ICE presence and crackdowns, which is there are so many beautiful mutual aid networks that are happening. There are neighbors giving neighbors rides to work so that they can be safe. There are people making meals and delivering food. There are people standing outside of schools during dismissal and arrival of students. People are just trying to weave networks of care and compassion in such incredible ways. So I'm cognizant as a faith leader that one of my roles and responsibilities is to use my public voice and that might not be everybody, that isn't everybody's role, and that's okay. And so just find your role. It might be, making food, delivering food. It might be talking to family members who voted for Trump and like sharing really honestly the pain that you see happening in our streets and the cruelty that you see. I mean, there are so many ways to be faithful in this moment. And one of those ways, there is no room in that discernment for inaction and for silence and for and for checking out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're really busy today with meeting with your neighbors and participating in a clergy press conference, which we're going to be covering as well. So,
Good.
but I really think it's important for people to hear the voice of local pastors who are working to heal these wounds. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some time with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad I could be here with you.
I'd like to close out our episode today with the words of Renee Nicole Good. On Fox News last night, Jesse Waters said on his show that Renee Nicole Good was a self-proclaimed poet with pronouns in her bio who leaves behind a lesbian partner. His tone and words were obviously meant to get Fox News viewers to roll their eyes at her death. But Renee was actually an award-winning poet. According to Literary Hub, quote, she won the prestigious Academy of American Poets Prize for a poem called On Learning to Dissect Fetal Pigs, unquote. I'm going to close out this episode by reading Renee's award-winning poem. I want back my rocking chairs, solipsist sunsets, and coastal jungle sounds that are tercets from cicadas and pentameter from the hairy legs of cockroaches. I've donated Bibles to thrift stores, mashed them in public trash bags with an acidic Himalayan salt lamp. The post-baptism Bibles, the ones plucked from street corners from the meaty hands of zealots, the dumbed-down, easy-to-read, parasitic kind. Remember more the slick rubber smell of high-gloss biology textbook pictures. They burned the hairs inside my nostrils, and salt and ink that rubbed off on my palms. Under clippings of the moon at 2:45 a.m. I study and repeat. Ribosome, endoplasmic, lactic acid, stamen. At the IHOP on the corner of Powers and Stetson Hills. I repeated and scribbled until it picked its way and stagnated somewhere I can't point to anymore. Maybe my gut. Maybe there, in between my pancreas and large intestine, is the piddly brook of my soul. It's the ruler by which I reduce all things now. Hard-edged and splintering from knowledge that used to sit. A cloth against fevered forehead. Can I let them both be? This fickle faith and this college science that heckles from the back of the classroom? Now I can't believe that the Bible and Quran and Bhagavad Gita are sliding long hairs behind my ear like Mom used to, and exhaling from their mouths, make room for wonder. All my understanding dribbles down the chin, onto the chest, and is summarized as, life is merely to ovum and sperm, and where those two meet, and how often and how well, and what dies there. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll be back with another episode on Monday.
This has been another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. The episode you've just heard is part of a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State. Be sure to follow BNG daily at baptistnews.com and subscribe to get notifications about future episodes. Baptist News Global is a national nonprofit news service that is independent, free, and faithful. BNG is supported by readers and listeners like you. Learn more at baptistnews.com.
This episode was produced and edited by Mac Bowles of TKG Communications, LLC, Dallas, Texas.